very much to the Tidewater Virginia Historic Society, and we are delighted to have a different subject today, and it is on the history and revitalization of Toano. So, just briefly, I am Sharon Short, the president of the Tidewater Virginia Historic Society here in Williamsburg. And we're just delighted. There's so many of you who came from or with us from out of town. This will be just about an hour, and we have asked Jack to talk about 30 minutes, 35 minutes, and we're going to do question and answer at that point. You can send something by chat, or you can just let us know that you have a question. Tidewater Virginia Historic Society, we do offer different programs and bus trips under normal life. Just briefly, what we do is we also we tried starting to do some we're starting to do some different things as our board. I am very delighted that we have some people on our board who are new over the last year, and we've got some dynamite ideas, some things that we're going to be offering to our membership particularly. We also, our website, if you would like to ever go to our website, it is tv-hf.org. And so we definitely look forward to sharing information with you. Just briefly, this is part of our mission, is the educating and the sharing of information for historic sites and Toano. It sounds like there's quite a few of you who have lived there and know each other. Well, welcome. Briefly, for our members, in April, please watch for the email with the quarterly newsletter. And there's going to be some very unusual and exciting things in there. So with that, I do not believe our program manager is on. Gloria, can you unmute yourself if you're on and I missed you? Okay. I would like to just make one brief announcement. It was brought to my attention there are a lot of things happening in town, and just briefly are in the area. St. Luke's Historical Church and Museum around Smithville, of course, has an upcoming lecture March 20th at 1 p.m. The lecture is Religion and the Constitution, and the tickets are $5. You will have to go to their website for St. Luke's Historic Church and Museum to get further information. And with that, I would like to introduce our fabulous speaker today, Jack Wray. Jack?
Well, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'd like to thank Gloria Nelson and Sharon Short for inviting me to speak to you all today about my hometown. I'm proud to be from Toano, Virginia. I grew up here in the 50s and 60s. My ancestors have been in this area since the 1790s. It was a special place to grow up. On one side of my childhood home was an open field being farmed. On the other side, less than 100 yards away, my grandparents' house. Now I'm at the village of Toano. It was a close-knit neighborhood. My mother wouldn't hesitate to send me out the door to borrow sugar, eggs, or butter if we happened to be a little short. I always felt safe and part of a larger community. Bottom line, we're trying to maintain these small town values and keep Toano a welcoming place for people to raise their families or to retire. This afternoon, I'll be speaking about the history and revitalization and a few recent milestones. At the end, if you all make it that far, I'll be happy to take some questions. So let's get started. The village of Toano was formerly known as Burnt Ordinary, after Fox's Ordinary burned to the ground during the American Revolution. Lafayette marched through here in 1781 on his way to Yorktown, and he camped 2 miles away at Chickahominy Church. We do have a little colonial history, but the most interesting part of our history was when the village was renamed Toano, a Paiute Indian word meaning high ground, after the C&O Railroad laid tracks through the center of town in 1881. The picture on the lower right, looking west towards Anderson Corner, depicts a water tank and depot. The train tracks actually crossed Route 60 by Hotel Felix, pictured on the top left. As the town enjoyed a boom during this era, people tired of waiting for the train to cross the road. It interfered with automobile and horse-drawn traffic. In 1908, the train tracks and depot were relocated to the north side of Toano. The water tank was dismantled and moved to Norwich at that time. And this is the relocated depot and tracks. The trains were able to bypass the town instead of running through it. The rail line brought rapid growth from the 1880s until the 1920s. Toano became an economic powerhouse. With the advent of truck farming, Toano became the largest shipping point between Richmond and Newport News. It was once bigger than pre-Rockefeller Williamsburg. Back in its heyday, it was not unusual to see 400 or 500 people a couple of banks, and several general merchandise stores. We had doctor and dentist offices, a local newspaper, and a high school. We even had a circus that came through town once a year. This is a copy of the original contract for the bank building that was built in 1903 by R.K. Taylor. That's him on the right side there. He was the architect and builder. They built the bank for $2,100. It'd be nice if we had contracts like this in this day and age. Okay. I have a hobby of mine is to clip newspaper articles, and this is one example of how Toano led the way in industry, commerce, and farming, even politics back in its heyday. Toano was often referred to as a village of stores. This is going to be a familiar face. This is Woody Taylor, the son of R.K. Taylor, in his Motley Ford in the 1940s. He and his brother Kemper owned Taylor and Sons Garage, and you can see our main street in the background. Woody was my neighbor, and that's me in the car with him when I was about 3. He and several of the proprietors that ran various businesses in town lived on my street, School Lane. I was in and out of their homes and their businesses from an early age. I probably didn't realize it at the time, but this was when I began taking Toano History 101. By the 1950s and 60s, Williamsburg had opened a new hospital and a couple of more modern grocery and clothing stores. More people started traveling to Williamsburg for their basic needs. Here is Moody Oil Company and Barksdale's drugstore on the south side of Route 60. In 1966, Richmond Road was widened from 2 to 4 lanes. Many of our historic buildings were demolished, including the ones in this picture. we lost much of our historic character and became just another small town in decline. This is the same view over 100 years later of our main street looking west towards Williamsburg. Amazingly, these buildings are still standing. They include the Masonic Lodge, the old bank building, and the Martin and Fahrenholt store. My grandfather, Walter Martin, owned and operated this store for 50 years and lived just across the street. This is a more recent picture of his store building. This is an old bill of sale that we found dating back to 1907, 1 year after the store was built. My grandfather began clerking for these men around the age of 23. And by 1911, when he was 26, he bought out Mr. Branch Martin and Mr. W.G. Fahrenholt and became the owner of W.C. Martin's General Merchandise Store. Also in that same year, he built an addition that doubled the size of the store. This was his house on the cover of this book. My Uncle Tom Martin, my mother, and their 3 siblings were born in the house. Later in life, Tom wrote his memoirs about growing up in the 1920s and 30s Toano. His writings have been a great inspiration to me. The book included a map Tom drew from memory of Toano's Main Street as it existed in the 30s. It basically stayed the same throughout the 50s and 60s when I grew up there. This was our once walkable village that most locals were familiar with prior to the road widening project. When I was just 15 years old in 1966, I personally witnessed the demolition of 14 historic buildings when Route 60 was expanded from 2 to 4 lanes. This was devastating to Toano. And I just recall there was a lot of gloom during this time. This was the last look of the buildings. You can see both sides of the street on the left where these men are gathered. That's the old drugstore, and on the right are the 3, the Masonic Lodge and the bank and the store. And this was the day the demolition equipment arrived, and I was there that day. Here's the old drugstore being taken down on the south side of Main Street. It was originally built in 1906 after the train tracks were moved. And that's a picture taken about 1920. It was called the Toano Drug Company. And it later became Barksdale's Drug Store. And this is the front view of the building being demolished. This is Taylor's Garage, built in 1912. It was a popular hangout of the locals. And this picture shows a bulldozer pushing it up in a pile. It was later set on fire and burned on the site. This is after the demolition, all but that drugstore still coming down, looking west towards Williamsburg. Our whole little village on that side was wiped out. Toano High School was built in 1908. Over 500 students graduated there before it was torn down in 1966 to make way for a new fire station. This was perhaps our saddest loss, as all the community activities took place around the school. My grandmother taught home economics there, and my aunts, uncles, neighbors, and parents all graduated from there. Also lost were 2 beautiful landmark hotels, the Green Shingle and Wayside Inns. They were the bookends that marked the village. To this day, Toano has never recovered from this road project. And I'm going to be talking about the rest of this presentation about important revitalization activities that happened from 2003 to present. My brother Jeff and I left Toano around 1978 to pursue a building career in Charlottesville. We founded Wray Brothers, Inc., a general contracting company, in 1981. After a little success, we were able to purchase our grandparents' home in 2003. This house was built in 1920 and is a Toano landmark. I got excited when I discovered this document, the 06 Toano Design Guidelines and Streetscape Plan. This document speaks about constructing sidewalks, pedestrian crosswalks, burying overhead utility lines, and adding streetscape improvements that would include street lights and a planted median. I began to visualize a Toano reminiscent of its heyday years in the 20th century. In 2012, James City County began designing the new firehouse to be built on the same site where Toano High School once stood. Architectural features of the school were used to showcase the new station. This is a great example of how we should continue this theme on our main street, where new infill buildings could evoke the architecture of old Toano, just as the 06 guidelines suggest. In 2012, my brother and I began acquiring properties where many of Toano's historic buildings were demolished. In recent years, this site had become an awful eyesore of blight in the middle of our once beautiful village. Using old photographs of the 19th and 20th century buildings previously located on this site, we teamed up with architect John Hopke to create a new concept called Toano Station. The same name this site was referred to 140 years earlier when the C&O Railroad built Toano's first depot here in 1881. We want to create a likeness of Barksdale's drugstore on the left and the old potato house on the right. They'll be anchoring the corners. The middle block will consist of apartments or offices on the second floor and retail on the ground floor. There's a little depot we want to recreate in the back, and we also have on-street parking proposed. This is a map of those properties, and the boxes shaded in green show the Toano Station conceptual plan for the new development that was shown on the previous slide. W.C. Martin Store building is shaded in yellow across the street. And outlined in red behind the road frontage properties are 4 historic homes of Toano's founders. And I'm going to show you a lineup. Well, first of all, that's my old friend Bobby Hornsby. He helped persuade former mayor of Williamsburg, Gil Granger, to sell one of the key road front properties to make this revitalization possible. And pictured from left to right, that's me, Bobby, and Jeff in our office in Charlottesville. We have some beautiful homes in Toano, and the first one on the left, that was built by H.U. Stevenson in 1901. He graduated from the Medical College of Virginia in 1895 and came to Toano that same year. He was Toano's first doctor and began his practice in the house. The house on the right was built by the Sweeneys in 1938. This family has a long history of being builders. George Patrick Sweeney built the Martin Fahrenhold store in 1906. He also helped build Toano High School in 1908. His son Linwood built this house and also the Women's Club in 1930. That's our ancestral home, the W.C. Martin house. It was sold to the Moyer family in 1964 when I was 12 years old by my grandmother. And Jeff and I were able to purchase it from her daughters in 2003. The W.G. Farrenhold Victorian home was built in 1901. It sits on the corner of Chickahominy and Richmond Roads. Mr. Farrenhold was partners with Branch Martin in the Martin and Farrenhold store. My grandfather used to take room in their store. This is the Gatewood house on the left. We don't own it. It was built by Lawrence Tribble Gatewood in 1911 for his parents. Dr. Gatewood was a renowned ENT physician from Toano who had his offices on Park Avenue in New York City. During World War I, he pioneered facial reconstructive surgery for soldiers returning home. This house is under threat of demolition, unfortunately. The owner is not very sympathetic about saving it. If we lose this one, it would create a huge hole in our revitalization efforts. If you want to learn more about the Gatewood, visit Save the Gatewood on Facebook. On the right is Lightfoot Richardson's house. He wore many hats, including being a James City County sheriff and auctioneer. This home was built in 1911. His relatives operated it as the Toano Motor Lodge back in the 1940s. The Chestnut family bought it in the 1970s. Their famous yellow chair is still standing in the front yard. Jeff and I got this 4-acre parcel in 2016 and cleaned up the whole property. We have a wonderful tenant, Janet Grimmett, who owns and operates Lucky Junk on the premises. It's an antique and architectural salvage business that includes a 7,000 square foot barn and at the back of the property. Her venues are quite popular with vintage market days, antique car shows, food trucks, and live music. This has been a great addition to our historic corridor. So the next thing we did along about 2017 is we renovated this house and restored it. We wanted to set the bar for quality, and you can see that house is beautiful today. It was always beautiful, but we improved it by quite a bit, and we're thrilled to be to own that home. You know, Toano was an unincorporated town. We don't have a government there. We're under the jurisdiction of James City County, and we thought we needed an organization to advocate for Toano. And the next step towards revitalization was to charter the Toano Historical Society, 501c3, in 2018. I'm the president of this organization, and we, our board of directors, we meet monthly in the W.C. Martin store building. We have 8 board members and several who work with us in a volunteer capacity. We're entering our 3rd year and feel we have a very capable group as we make progress in promoting our mission. Simultaneously, while chartering Toano Historical Society, we submitted an application to the Department of Historic Resources to form the Toano Commercial Historic District. This consists of 9 buildings that date from the late 1880s to the 1930s and have been in continuous use as commercial enterprises. They define our small town character and need to be preserved. In 2018 and 19, the historic district was designated a state and national landmark. These designations provide opportunities for tax credits for historically appropriate renovations of the contributing buildings. We hope this will increase investor interest in redeveloping the center of town. And by the way, this is the first historic district in James City County. And this is an individual look at these beautiful little buildings we've had since the early 1880s. Pictured on the left was originally the Powers store. During my time in Toano, it was called Jack's Place. They sold kites and firecrackers and caps and cap guns and all kinds of cool stuff for kids. And it's currently Toano General and is a gun shop. Bank Store on the right was originally a lumber and millwork supply house. It's been numerous other things, including the parish hall for Hickory Neck Church. Currently, it's an antique store called Toano Thrift. That's the old Esso gas station on the left. And now it's called Bonnie's Cutting Up. It's a hair salon. Pictured on the right is a very familiar home to everybody that grew up in Toano. It's a Carlton house, a Carlton Mitchell house, circa 1887. And Joe Carlton lived here his whole life and was 101 when he died. His parents were the proprietors of Hotel Felix. Joe's nephew, Bobby Mitchell, a physician in Richmond, inherited this home. It is currently owned by his widow, Mary Mitchell. For a brief time in its history, the home was a funeral parlor. And these are the big three, I call them. Starting on the left was originally W.R. Branch's store, built in 1902. Since 1910 has been the home of the Masonic Lodge. In the middle is the old bank building. Sam Hazelwood owned this building and operated his real estate business here for many years until he sold it to local attorney Andy Bradshaw and CPA Mike Flannery. Peggy Kropf with Heart's Ease Landscaping is a tenant in the building and occupies the space where the original bank vault still exists. And then on the right is the Martin and Fahrenholt store building built in 1906. Moving further west, this is the old post office building that was in operation through the late 70s until a new one was built next to the Masonic Lodge. It's been several different things. Currently, it's occupied by So Toano Braiding Salon. On the right is the famous former Mrs. Mosley's Diner, later Snowmania. And sadly, this building is currently vacant. We hope we can attract a tenant to take over that nice little historic building. With all the revitalization efforts up to this point, we realized there was a need for a bigger picture, a more comprehensive plan for the historic village. Jeff and I hired Allison Platt of Rivers and Associates out of Greensboro, North Carolina. She's a renowned urban designer. When she arrived in Toano, she was impressed with the body of work we had already accomplished, and especially liked the Toano Station conceptual renderings by John Hopke. Using these and the 06 streetscape guidelines as a starting point, she laid out a nice blend of right-sized infill buildings to be constructed amongst our historic homes and historic buildings that line our main street. And I heard her say, she said she doesn't take on projects unless she thinks they have great potential, and she believes Toano surely does have a lot of potential. This plan is probably almost a half a mile long, so if implemented, it could bring about 100,000 square feet of retail space, 34,000 square feet of office space, and more than 100 townhome units. Retail offerings would complement the unique and historic character of Toano to include restaurants, diners, artisan shops, a small grocery, bakery, coffee, dress shop, brew pub, all sorts of small businesses. We need places we can go instead of having to go to Williamsburg. They would be bed and breakfast and Airbnb opportunities for some of the historic homes. And there's room for 20 or more small cottage-style bungalows. This conceptual plan even includes putting back likenesses of our original bookends of the village, the Green Shingle Inn and the Wayside Inn, those two bigger blocks on the upper page. This plan is inviting, authentic, and an historical connection to our past. Thanks. This is an example of an enlarged view of the Gatewood property in the lower right, and it shows how an attached addition would look while saving the main house and keeping that in place. It's on an 1.5 acre lot that would provide ample parking for a number of businesses. Here she is in Toano. She was taking a picture of the Gatewood house, and she presented this conceptual master plan to several stakeholders and county officials in the Martin Store building in May of 2019. Her presentation was met with very favorable response. Ms. Platt recommended that a market assessment be done to validate her conceptual plan and also use as a necessary tool to attract investors and new businesses. Subsequently, Jeff and I hired Greg Payne with economic leadership in the summer of 2019. Although Toano is an unproven market, the resulting analysis was favorable with promising demographics and development trends. Also in 2019, we made a decision to remove the blighted buildings on the south side of our main street that had cropped up after the 1966 road widening. This really opened things up and made the space more visible so people could understand where the new development could take place. And that's the new street wall we propose to build there. These buildings will match the scale and architecture of the historic ones across the street. We spent a lot of time, I did personally with John Hopke, trying to get details right, especially with that drugstore and the middle buildings there, going to provide homes to various businesses eventually. This was our first ever Christmas tree lighting on the Toano Station grounds soon after the demolition of those blighted buildings. We had over 1,000 people attend that evening, and you could feel the excitement about the future of Toano. S4 Lighting, a local business, donated many of the lights, including 2,400 used to decorate a live 65-foot tall evergreen. This was just a wonderful community event. We have plans underway to put a restaurant in our grandfather's store building. And quoting from the market assessment, they said the #1 need is an upscale or mid-level restaurant and bar. There's a desperate need for a good sit-down place with few options nearby. One good popular restaurant could change the atmosphere and perception of Toano. This building is 3,000 square feet on the first floor and 3 on the second floor, totaling 6,000 square feet. There's a beautiful large area upstairs for venues like wedding receptions, birthday parties, or company meetings. That counter you see in there belonged to our great-grandfather, Thomas Smith Martin. We found it in his general merchandise store in Lenexa and hauled it and put it there. It's just a beautiful space inside there, as many of y'all know and have been in this building. We believe the community will rally around the restoration of this beloved historic building. It could be a real kickstart for Toano's revitalization. Now that this building is in the historic district, we will use the available tax credits to mitigate the cost of the renovation. And we've been talking about this for a long time, about 3 years since we purchased it. And it's literally taken us 3 years to acquire the corner lots necessary for our parking area. We just closed on the last one a couple of weeks ago. And after our new site plan is approved, we're going to start looking for the perfect restaurateur for this building. In the meantime, we are building a bakery in the historic Travers home. It's going to be occupied by Virginia Bread, a local business owned by Ainsley and Colin O'Rourke. It was built by C.P. Slater in around 1900. The Travers family purchased it in 1943. And we learned that two of their family members were born in the house. They are super excited about their old home place being restored and repurposed. It will become a bakery, coffee, and sandwich shop. And it's located on the corner of Church Lane and Route 60, right next to the Toano Women's Club. Now, there's a sign we had made for it. Rendering up on that sign by John Hopke. And there's some of their bread products being sold there. They're going to be an instant success in this building, I can tell you that. The next step towards revitalization was becoming an affiliate member of the Virginia Main Street. This is going to allow us to seek opportunities for grants and so forth. Main Street demonstrates the power of small steps, small businesses, and small deals. These small developments can add up to a big impact. Often a company's greatest asset is its historic building stock. They physically connect us to the past, tell us who we are and where we came from. Small town revitalization is about creating places where people want to be. I'm going to have to give a plug to Maureen Anderson, owner of Tasha's Own. She occupies the historic Stevenson House behind the firehouse. This is a unique agriculturally zoned 3-acre property that allows her to raise goats for soap making, bees for honey, chickens for eggs, and a garden for fresh vegetables. She's been a longtime member of the Williamsburg Farmers Market on Duke of Gloucester Street. When COVID started last March and that market got shut down, she spearheaded the Toano Open Air Market that began on her small farm. By the summertime, Jeff and I welcomed the Toano Open Air Market to the old Toano Station grounds, now referred to as the Green. This brought instant visibility to her efforts and a whole new level of community awareness. These are pictures taken on opening day, March 6th, a couple of weeks ago. And I tell you, they have kids from 1 to 92 that enjoy this market. It's held each Saturday from 9 to 1, right through the time we have our annual Christmas tree lighting in December. And there's some of the products that are sold there. We even have a little table there and sell our Toano merchandise. You know, we have hats, and my cousin Tim wearing the historic Toano hat, and my daughter Ellie and I are set up in front of that wagon over there. Our friend Jim Harris makes these wonderful salt and pepper shakers, pepper mills. Our Uncle Tom's book we have for sale there, and then greeting cards that were watercolors by my Aunt Luann, who is 93 and listening today. So come on out to the market and see us. We have a great time out there. Because of COVID, we're going to we're going to try to do an online membership drive. You can follow us on Facebook, sign up at the Toano Open Air Market to receive our newsletters, and check us out on our website and so forth. These are the resources where you can contact us. I even put my personal email and phone number there. And this pretty much concludes my discussion. I just really believe that we have the perfect storm brewing in this historic village. All these small steps we've taken are going to add up to creating something special. This small village deserves its rightful place in the history of James City County. We have tremendous potential to be a new historic destination and a complementary asset to the historic triangle. So that's it, folks. If y'all are still around, I'll be glad to take some questions.
I have a question. You mentioned the WR Branch store. I watched your video beforehand, and wasn't Branch the potato king of James City County?
No, not that Branch. That was Christopher Carey Branch. That was Hammond Branch's father, who was the potato king. He might have been a relative, but what wasn't the potato king? No.
Okay.
That building was bricked over sometime in 1940s, and all that beautiful clapboard siding is still under that brick. It doesn't look the same it did from a long time ago.
Jack, my name is Charlie Hart. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. We live up here in Wellington Estates, and we drive through Toano quite regularly. And you have opened my eyes to a new way to look at Toano. When I go through there now, I will be looking at all of these stores and exploring, and I've got to find out where Chesapeake Street is. I don't know where it is. I know where Church Street is, and I've been out on a lot on the Chickahominy as a bicyclist, but I will look at Toano with a whole new view as I drive through there now. So thank you very much. And also, I didn't know about the marketplace. So I've gotten a note of that every Saturday now, 9 to 1.
That's right. Thank you, Charlie. And we look forward to seeing you out there. I'll show you where Chesapeake Street is.
Yeah, I'll look it up on the map.
I think Chesapeake Avenue was the original route of the railroad, wasn't it? Didn't it parallel Chesapeake Avenue?
It was named after the Chesapeake in Ohio. Yes.
Oh, okay. So that's what.
And did you say that the depot and water tower from the original station were moved to Norge?
That's right. Yeah, they needed to maintain that water source, so they left us the well, and which we used. Toano had the earliest water system. Back in the 40s, we had water and sewer. The little subdivision I lived in, but yeah, the water tank was dismantled and moved to Norge in 1907, 08, along that time.
Hey, Jack, there's a question about the Gatewood House. Could you remind people about the Gatewood and how to find out about it?
Yeah, the Gatewood is just it's so sad to look at it when you ride by it. It wasn't protected. The plywood on the windows came off, and the house is it's all brick. It's not a framed house. It's a brick with Flemish bond, and it's sound, but the interior is deteriorated. It's going to take quite a bit to renovate it. We're trying to put it in the historic district, and we're trying to add more homes and buildings in the district where people can use these tax credits, but need somebody to step up and get it. It needs an investor, really. We had somebody looking at it at one time, but the present owner, when he bought it, he bought it right at the top of the real estate market, and I think he owes a little money on it still. So to him, the building is worth more removed from the site and starting over. But to me, having lost so many buildings in our past, we can ill afford to lose that one. So we're just waiting to see what happens with it.
Jack, some advice to you. Don't do in your plans what Williamsburg has done to its downtown. They've shot themselves in both feet with no place to park. Downtown colonial Williamsburg. Unless you
I understand.
have a special phone, there are 3 different ways to park. They all run $2 an hour and up. So please leave in your new development places to park your doggone car.
That's exactly right. That's why we hired a professional to kind of lay it out. Now she's got parking, and we're limited on space. You know, we border a railroad on one side and a kind of a residential neighborhood, and in the middle we don't have that much space, and that's why we got her to size these new buildings properly and to leave ample parking. So we're not going to become a new town, but we want to make sure we on character.
Jack, this is Keith Marston Carter from Idaho. I just wanted to make a comment. Linda Smith and I went to Toano High School for 1st and 2nd grade.
I know you all did, and I'm jealous. They shut the school down before I got a chance to go there.
I know, I bet you are.
I really was really disappointed that I didn't get to attend, even if it was just the 1st and 2nd grades. But yeah, that school is beloved by everybody that knows anything about Toano.
Would you let me put a personal note in here? Keith Marston, I worked with you in 1968 at Colonial Williamsburg over the summer. I'm Bill Cole. We had a great group of people. My friend Betty Meanley Crenshaw, I think she's known to most people in the family in Toano. And Betty Richardson was also a dear friend just outside of Toano. Anyway, it's interesting to catch up with people, and thank you so much for your presentation. It's just wonderful.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, by luck of the Irish ran out and I couldn't get on in time, so I apologize. But I got to hear most of it. And it reminded me when I grew up in a town, Sturgeon, Missouri, the kids would go to the soda fountain place and we'd have cherry phosphates and swivel on the seats. The ladies would go to the funeral parlor and gossip. And the guys would go to the filling station and catch up on those news and bet each other different things like, I bet you can't eat 4 dozen deviled eggs. Yes, I can. He went home, this fella went home, made 4 dozen deviled eggs, brought them back. They were still warm, couldn't eat them, so he lost. So the spirit of little towns is just wonderful that you cannot duplicate and when they get too large. So I certainly appreciate your being here today, and it's still open for Fred Bolt sent me this wonderful booklet and this other one, and I think they're still in print. If not, I will make arrangements for the library at Croker to have them so people can go in and read, or you guys go work something out, because it's really interesting and you have your own little copy to see how it once looked. So I'm just thrilled. This is my first program, by the way. So maybe my Irish luck will improve when the next one comes about, which is David Givens, who's going to talk to the archaeologist for Jamestown. So that's going to be another old town, and not a little older than yours, Jack.
Yeah, that's right. Can't take that away from you.
Okay, so anybody else have something they'd like to?
I was just going to say I enjoyed Jack's pictures. I lived on the hill, which is now School Lane. We walked down the street, first met the school bus at Taylor's Garage after the high school closed. And then we took the school bus at Moody Oil Company. You showed us pictures of both of those. And then we moved over to waiting for the school bus at Mrs. Barksdale's drugstore.
Oh,
Mrs. Barksdale and Elizabeth Martin ran the drugstore. So,
Yeah, they were my cousins.
Jack, I have one more question about, you mentioned Robert Hornsby. Can you talk a little bit more about his involvement in the early period of this project?
Well, Bobby and I were in a band together when we were like 15 years old called the Gentlemen. And we even performed at the Phi Beta Kappa Hall one time. And although I only attended James Bayer 1 year, we remained friends. And of course, he's in the real estate business, and I called on him because we had the very important Guild Ranger to sell it. And he's helped me out a few times in Toano, and I really appreciate it. So that's our connection.
well, any
Good
more
job. I
comments?
enjoyed it.
Oh, there's my daughter, Ellie.
My
And I
soccer
see-
practice got delayed a little bit, so I'm glad that happened so I could watch the whole thing.
Good.
Hi, Ellie.
Hi.
And I see my friend Miriam Mitchell on the lower right there. She's listening in. I'd like to wish her a happy birthday. It was her 90th birthday yesterday, and she has a wonderful story about her growing up in Toano. She's muted. You're muted right now.
Where is she? Oh, there she is. I see her.
Anyway, if my cousin Tim Martin, my Uncle Tom's son, he was has helped me along with his wife. They're our newsletter editors, and he supposedly recorded this today. So we'll have, for those of you who didn't get a chance to see it, we're going to try to put it on our Toano Historical Society website at some point.
Yeah, I've got it recorded. We'll see what happens after this presentation is over, and I try to manipulate the file. So we'll try to make it available as soon as possible.
Okay, Tim.
All right, any more comments? I don't know if Sharon Short is still on.
Yes, I am.
Okay, so
We want
thank you.
to thank everyone. Thank you, Gloria Nelson, our program manager. And thank you, Jack and Tim, for your support for Jack. But we thank everyone. And it's been fun listening to all of these memories flow back and forth. I'm so glad that you were able to join, and that's the wonder of Zoom. It gives us a capability no matter where we are. So everyone have a wonderful day. As Gloria said, our next Tidewater Virginia Historic Society program will be May 14th, and it'll be David Givens talking about new discoveries at historic Jamestown.